Welcome to the Greenville farm. We're here standing in an alfalfa oat companion cropping plot where we're testing different oat rates and different water stress levels of the oat companion crop. And it's a really interesting study, and we've learned that quite a few people in Utah use oat companion cropping when establishing alfalfa to control weeds and to boost their yields of their first year alfalfa stands. So this is a really interesting plot, and I look forward to sharing it with you. This is the 80-pound oat rate, and this is a pretty high rate for planting oats with alfalfa, but it has been used in the past. This rate does yield the best as far as first year yields, but the second cut yields are not that great. And this year we have quite a few weeds. If you can tell in this plot, there are a lot of weeds. And when we look down in, this is the 100% irrigation level. And you'll be able to see a few alfalfa plants in there. Not very thick though, but they are there. And as we walk down this irrigation level, we'll see that the oats get shorter and a little more water stressed, and there are still a few alfalfa plants in there, and along with some weeds. You can see some weeds in there as well, but they're not as thick as they should be, or they would be if there were no oats there. Then as we continue down, this is about a 25% irrigation level. This is pretty low, and you can tell that the oats and the alfalfa and the weeds are all stunted in this plot. This is our dry land setting, and you can tell that the alfalfa seedlings are very water stressed down there, and that can be due on part to the fact that the oats are taking up some of the water, and this is potentially pretty detrimental to the alfalfa stand in the future. This is the 10-pound rate. We skipped a few. We skipped through the 40-pound rate down here, and then the 20-pound rate, and this is the 10-pound rate. And this is a good one to look at because you can tell that there is some weeds that are growing in there. The alfalfa is obviously suppressed as well. It'll be hard to find some alfalfa in here, but there should be some. Okay, there's a few alfalfa plants growing in there, but the alfalfa is still suppressed at this level. The weeds aren't suppressed as well, but in past years the weeds have usually been suppressed around 60% of what the control would be. But as we move down, here's the 50% irrigation level. It doesn't look like it'll yield very well, and there's quite a few weeds. Here's the 25% irrigation level, and some of the alfalfa is growing a little better in this irrigation level. There's a little more room for it to grow, and the oats aren't as tall. And here's our dryland setting right here, and nothing seems to grow well in the dryland, but that's the way it goes. Here we have the weed-free and untreated plots. The weed-free plot was achieved using 2,4-DB and clethodim to control the broadleaves and the grasses, and it turned out pretty clean, and the alfalfa is growing very well in it. If we walk towards the high irrigation level, you'll notice there are a few weeds. The alfalfa is growing well, and it's looking really good. If you look over here, this is right next to it, also the high irrigation level. There are quite a few alfalfa plants growing in there, a little more than what you would see probably in the higher oat rates, but there are still a lot of weeds growing here. This is not what you want to see. This is really bad weed year. As we move down to our medium irrigation levels, the alfalfa starts to grow a little shorter, and the weeds seem to stay the same, similar weed competition throughout. Here's the low irrigation level, about 25%. The alfalfa is still pretty short. In a normal setting, this might yield maybe a ton per acre in a single year. And here the weeds have overtaken the alfalfa as well. The alfalfa seems to grow a little better, or at least you can see the alfalfa here. Last year we conducted the same study with similar results, except for that there are far more weeds this year than there were last year. And if you notice from this chart talking about stand density, that the stems per square foot in the alfalfa that was planted with oats is way lower than when the alfalfa was planted alone. And the stand density worsens as the rate increases. This is the yield data from last year, and from this chart kind of reminds me of when I was a kid and I decided to eat too many donuts, and it seemed like a good idea at the time, but later I regretted it. And a farmer could regret this if he planted 80 pounds of oats per acre, that eventually the farmer will realize that there's not very much alfalfa in there. And it looks really great that you're getting almost 5 tons of yield per acre, but when you look closer at it, maybe reducing the oat rate or going with another weed control alternative might be a better option. However, one thing to note is that the treatments of oats significantly reduce the amount of weeds that are grown in the plot. Now we've moved to another alfalfa oat companion crop trial where we're testing different timings of herbicide application on the oats and the alfalfa. The different timings were before the alfalfa emerged. When the oats emerged, about 6 inches, 12 inches, 18 inches, and then when the oats were headed out. So this is a pretty interesting trial. This is for mostly for people who want to control erosion, but they still want to have the utility of the weed control when they're planting the oats. Okay, we'll start with this plot. This was sprayed before the alfalfa emerged, when the oats were about 3 inches tall, and the weeds have come back, so sometimes this may work if the weeds are already present before the alfalfa grows, but usually that's not the case. If we move over here, this is a plot where the oats were killed when they were around 9 inches tall, and that's from the base of the stem to the tip of the leaf, so the canopy would probably be about 6 inches tall. And then if we move over here, this is the 12-inch height, and this is where the alfalfa really starts to get suppressed. And then if we move over more, we'll see this is where the 18-inch tall oats, and the alfalfa is in there, but it is pretty suppressed, and there will be a lot of corpses when it comes time to harvest in a week or two. And then when the oats are headed out, this is probably not a good idea, but we included it anyways. If we go over here, this is where we didn't spray it at all, and there are weeds and oats and alfalfa and everything. Same time, so the alfalfa height on that far one would have been around 3 inches, and here we would have been about 6 inches tall for the alfalfa. But this alfalfa is growing way better than its counterpart that was planted with oats. And then I don't even know if it's worth talking about these guys, because this is definitely not recommended to kill the oats at these rates. And this is what happens when you kill out the weeds when they're really tall. And you can see that the alfalfa is stunted at this point. when it's clear seeded, and then the weeds are killed out later in maturity. And this won't yield the greatest. The quality will be pretty bad, but at least the weeds will be dead. We are here in western Idaho in a farmer's field where we have done a similar trial to the one in Logan, where we have sprayed the alfalfa at different timings with glyphosate, and we also sprayed the oats, and we've found some interesting things here, a lot of them similar to what they are in Logan. This is a plot where the alfalfa and the oats were planted together, and the oats were not sprayed at any time. And you can tell that there are very few alfalfa plants in here because the oats kind of drowned them out. And this is pretty typical for all alfalfa companion crops, where they're drowned out. Move over here where the oats were sprayed at about 9 inches tall. Then we notice quite a few more stems in the alfalfa field, and it looks pretty good. The yield on this is lower than the yield on alfalfa that is grown alone, but it still looks pretty good, and it still looks like it's a valid way to establish alfalfa. This is a plot where the oats were terminated at a taller stage, probably roughly around 12 to 15 inches tall, and this is where the alfalfa starts to really lose its momentum. If you can see here in this plot, the alfalfa stand is pretty sparse. There's a lot of empty spaces. This will give a lot of room for weed growth in coming years, and there will probably be some weed growth by the time we harvest second crop in this plot. This is a plot where the alfalfa was planted alone, and it was sprayed at the earliest stage around 3 inches. And if you look, the stand is really good. There's a lot of regrowth. There's not a lot of places where the alfalfa didn't come up, and we would consider this a very successful establishment stand. Here's some yield information from last year's herbicide application timing trial. And you'll notice pretty quickly that whenever oats are grown and then herbicide is applied to kill the weeds and the oats, that you'll receive a yield decrease, and that becomes more severe as you let the oats mature. So if you're going to attempt this, then it's best to apply herbicides when the oats are short, so that you can give the alfalfa the best opportunity to grow and produce.